and welcome to everybody who's joined us this evening for this annual Anna Craft Memorial Lecture. This lecture is being held in association with the Bira Creativity SIG, which Anna actually set up with Bob Jeffrey many years ago. Professor Craft was internationally known for her work on creativity, on creative pedagogies, creative learning, mainly in the early and primary years. When I look back at her body of work, I was astounded, really, although I shouldn't have been surprised, to find she'd written 5 single-authored books, 10 edited collections, 53 chapters, and 46 peer-reviewed papers, and she was, sadly, at the time of her demise, only 52 years old. Now, that is going some, I would say. I was privileged to be both a colleague and a friend of Anna's, and when she passed, Kerry Chappell, who was working then at the University of Exeter, as she is now, as Anna indeed was, and I, who was working then at the Open University, as indeed I am now, we're long in the tooth in both respects, decided to set up, as those were the 2 universities that Anna was working in, we set up an annual memorial lecture. The intention of these lectures is to help sustain Anna's very significant legacy, and thus to disseminate the best contemporary thinking about creativity and in education, both in this country, but also significantly abroad. We've had a large number of luminaries offering us their connections to Anna's work and their understandings, including Sir Ken Robinson, Guy Claxton, Pat Cochrane, James Kaufman, Howard Gardner, and last year, Veronica Robbins. And this year we have the privilege, which I'm looking forward to enormously, of listening to Dr. Kerry Chappell share hers. But at this moment, I'm going to hand over now to Sandy Allen, who's the head of the school at the University of Exeter, head of School of Education. Sandy.
Thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you everyone for the invitation to join you this afternoon. It really is a privilege to be here to pause and reflect on colleagues and their really important contributions in research terms. I'm not quite sure how time's come to pass it as it has done, but I've been involved in a variety of ways with the School of Education at Exeter for nearly 15 years now. And given that, I was really fortunate to have joined the department at a very similar time to Professor Anna Craft. And I was just a part-time research fellow when I joined all that time ago, with little contact outside of the project I was working on. But even then, it was really hard not to get to know Anna or for her to leave an impression. And I know that several of the obituaries that were written commented on her warmth, her supportive and generous nature. And I know this to be true. Through many of the junior academics I was working with at the time, I saw firsthand the serious impact that both her thinking and her generosity had on them. She spent many hours mentoring colleagues, writing alongside them, encouraging them to pursue their own methods and interests. But even for someone like me who was slightly further removed, I remember well the warmth that she radiated in staff meetings or just as you happened to pass by her office. And I remember also this alongside the really refreshing challenges and provocations that she'd bring to meetings here in the School of Education to keep people thinking about why they did what they did or what they'd said. Indeed, when I think of Anna, I really do think of her as a professor in the fullest sense of the term, as an internationally renowned expert in her field, a renowned teacher, a leader, and a mentor. And I feel very fortunate to have witnessed someone fulfilling that role in the way that they did at such an early and formative stage in my own career. But as you'd imagine, Anna doesn't just live on in terms of her impression. Her work is still really well utilised, and we return to it all the time in our department, as I'm sure many of you do elsewhere too. It never ceases to prompt a smile when I see students reference her work or they start to discuss it in seminars, often because of the joy they too experience when they come across her ideas for the first time. And so, as well as reflect on Anna, I've also got the privilege of introducing you to one of my other colleagues, who is our keynote speaker this afternoon, Dr. Kerry Chappell. And I'm sure I don't have to say much by way of introduction for Kerry. I'm sure she's well known to many of you. And you may well also know that she joined Anna Craft's team around 2008. So first working with Anna on question posing with possibility thinking, and then moving on to examine possibility thinking in relation to wise humanizing creativity, a concept that Kerry and Anna conceived together. And Kerry's background has been in dance education. And this is something I believe I'm right in saying she continues to think on and return to in practice and research today. Her own intellectual project, if we want to talk about it in that way, is one where she explores how we conceive of and teach for creativity in education. And hers is a unique perspective because it's driven by that dance education background. So it's one where she sees embodied dialogue as the key driver of creativity. Now, Kerry's work as an educator and researcher also regularly raises a smile from me because of the way I think it continues to draw on and remind us of Anna's work, but also because of the way in which she's taken it, how it's played out in various different ways which I think no doubt would have surprised and delighted Anna too. So without further ado, Kerry, I believe I'm handing over to you for to give us some thoughts for this evening and to outline some of this in more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. I'm just going to get that up. Can everybody see those slides that I've just popped up? If you give me the nod, Sandy, that would be great because I can only see your face at the moment. Great. OK, I'm going to get underway then. So, excuse me. Thank you, Teresa and Sandy. It's a real honour to be here presenting this 2023 Anna Craft Memorial Lecture. I want to say thank you to everyone for coming. I realise we're in different time zones, different sort of cruxing into people's evenings, etc. So I do really appreciate you all joining us today. I know in the audience we have all kinds of academic colleagues, but also some of Anna's friends and family. So welcome to everybody. I'm going to be wearing my heart on my sleeve in this lecture. Anna was not only a close colleague, but she was also a very close friend. Across the time we knew each other, formally, Anna was my PhD supervisor, my manager when I was a research fellow, and my academic colleague when I stepped into a lecturing role. But the longer I knew Anna, the more professional roles overlapped into friendship, and ultimately families that knew each other with great affection. This was instigated, I think, by Anna's open door approach to her own life and family. I remember having supervisions in the family house in Harpenden, having meetings at another family home in Queen's Terrace in Exeter. Her parents would often be around. Morris, her dad, planting flowers in window boxes. I should add that Morris is a retired professor himself, so his skills go well beyond planting flowers. He was always a rather daunting gardening presence for me as a young PhD student. Ella and Hugo, Anna's children, would trip in from school and stick their heads around the door for a quick update on their day. And before I had my own children, Anna and Simon put me up in their attic while I firstly commuted from London to Exeter to work at the university, and then again when Scott, my partner, and I house hunted so that we could move to Exeter. Anna's door was always open, both professionally and personally, and this brought me into affectionate relationship with her immediate and extended family, relationships which are still very dear to me now in Anna's absence. As often as we can organise it, I drink tea and eat cake with Alma, Anna's mum. I think for both of us, in very different ways, it taps us into our relationships with Anna and helps to keep her a lively part of our day-to-day existences. This lecture is also going to have something of a narrative tone. I need to tell you this story in order that you can understand how I arrived at the final focus of this lecture, the work that is currently taking place under the banner of the Creativity and Educational Futures Network at Exeter. I first met Anna at a researcher practitioner crossover conference in London. I'd read her books, Creativity Across the Primary Curriculum and Creativity and Early Years Education. At the time, I wasn't sure why they resonated so strongly. It was only later, reflecting on what we had in common, that I realised why I'd found such a kindred spirit. It transpired we'd both studied psychology, Anna combining her studies with philosophy and going on to work as an early years teacher. I had combined mine with physiology and follow-up study and work in arts and education. When I read Anna's work, I could see familiar patterns, or through lines, as she used to call them. They were patterns and threads that it was very easy for me to pick up and intertwine in my own ways of thinking. I was studying creativity in dance education at what is now called Trinity Laban Conservatoire. At the time, colleagues will have known it as Laban Centre London. I had started my preliminary studies and had a supervisor in-house. But when I read Anna's work, I knew I wanted to ask her to be a second supervisor from outside the institution. My work was a combination of the arts and social sciences. The former I had in abundance at Laban, especially through the brilliant involvement of Veronica Jobbins, who gave last year's memorial lecture. But the social sciences perspective was what I gained from Anna's involvement in my PhD. Although that makes it sound slight, what Anna brought to her supervision of my PhD is what she brought to everything she did. Her possibility thinking, her enthusiasm, and such sharp insight that I would often find myself sitting in supervision, scribbling as fast as I could to capture her words of wisdom. I went on from those supervisions to work as a research fellow alongside Anna in possibility thinking and creative partnerships research projects. It was during these projects that I was also privileged to work with Teresa Kremen and Pam Bernard. I could not have asked for a more intelligent, conscientious and caring group of mentors to start my academic career. Alongside this, I also worked as an RF with Anna at the Open University. I went on to become a research fellow in the CREATE research group at the University of Exeter, as Sandy said, and ultimately to gain a lecturing role in the School of Education there. It was when I was a senior lecturer that Anna and I developed the idea of WISE humanising creativity together, an idea I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We developed this concept because we felt there was a need for a way of conceptualising creativity in education which could counter issues of technological proliferation, issues of sustainability, environmental damage, education as the transmission of knowledge, and creativity as marketised. We co-developed WHC by combining Anna's WISE creativity theory and my humanising creativity theory. WISE creativity means that creativity is not value neutral and that wisdom and ethical judgment need to be considered as part of any creative process. Humanising creativity positions embodied dialogue as the creative driver, where through the interaction of creative process and identity, the maker engages in a humanising journey of becoming. At the heart of WHC was embodied dialogue. We theorised that this dialogue happens via conversations between the inside and the outside of the body and provides transformative potential for new world views. This kind of dialogue is about embodied shared action, which happens individually, collaboratively, and communally. Through this generative embodied dialogue, Anna and I argued that creators are making and being made. They are on a journey of becoming, developing their identities as they develop creative ideas. By implication, this has an embedded ethical focus. And between 2011 and 2017, WHC was applied in a variety of research initiatives in the UK and Europe, including Create It and the See to Learn EU projects, the Siobhan Davis Next Choreography Dance project, and the Carousel Early Years project. But despite seeing it offer strong at-scale framework for creative teaching and learning, research and enactment, I found myself questioning it. And I also found myself questioning it without Anna around. It was during this period of WHC success that Anna died in 2014. Where we would have bounced ideas around and compared notes previously, I could only talk into the ether and imagine what her response might be to my doubts. But I held on to something that Anna said in one of the last meetings we had. She indicated that the future would not be about trying to solidify and protect her thinking, but about developing it and new conceptual ideas in relation to what the future might hold. When I look at this picture, I hear Anna saying, "Go on, you know what to do." And so I started to read and listen to new ideas that were emerging and to see what they meant for WHC. I started to engage with post-human writing, the likes of Rosie Braidotti and Karen Barad. I felt that the central tenet of WHC, embodied dialogue and becoming, resonated with post-human arguments such as Barad's, that we need to think of the world and everything in it as becoming through different fluid identities and subjectivities. They therefore remain core to my developing theorising about creativity here. But post-human and new materialist ideas which encourage us to better consider other than human actants and to question the very nature of materiality led me to change and develop my theorising about creativity in education. In 2018, I was able to pull these ideas together into this book chapter, from wise humanising creativity to post-humanising creativity. There are 4 fundamental points from post-human and new materialist thinking that I now work with in relation to conceptualising creativity. Firstly, alongside humans, other living beings, objects, materials, and environments are equal actants. Next, that these interact with humans, meaning that we should actively consider and respond to the agencies of all different kinds of bodies. Thirdly, we are all intrinsically enmeshed in an embodied way, no matter our materiality. And lastly, that we need to shift from trying to extend human rights to other than humans, and to think about ethics more as an ethics of transformation, which encourages ethics to emerge from this enmeshing and interaction of human and other than human. Rather than stating that we should think about the wider system or environment as just context, new materialist theorists take a bolder step and argue that objects and environments are lively sources of action. This starts to shift us away from a socio-constructivist, humanly superior view, which also implies that particular humans are more superior or more human than others. And it pushes us to de-center humans and create space for others of all kinds to thrive. Alongside this decentering, Barad refers to what she calls intra-action, as opposed to interaction. For Barad, intra-action does not depend on pre-existing bound entities and really tries to incorporate those enmeshed agencies of all the different kinds of bodies that are involved. And within this enmeshing, for Barad, it's really important to see that things do not have inherently determinate boundaries. The boundaries between people and people or people and objects are not as clear-cut as we might think. And this means that the dominance of humans is also not clear-cut and needs to be questioned when we're thinking about creativities in practice. Barad also stresses that she is not letting go of being human, but that she sees humans as phenomena, or beings in their differential becomings, particular material reconfigurings of the world with shifting boundaries and properties that stabilize and destabilize, along with specific material changes in what it means to be human. So really bringing to fore the fluidity. And for me, this suggests that who creates is a much less important question than how do we create. And by that, I mean we in the broadest sense. So including other living beings, materials, environments, and objects in our understanding of creativity in education. Braidotti then states that there is an emerged sense of interconnection, an enlarged sense of interconnection, between self and others, including non-human or earth others. And it really requires us to reject a notion of self-centered individualism, which puts humans at the top of the pile all the time. Again, though, Braidotti is really clear that going beyond the human is not about dehumanizing. The concerns of all actants need to be part of our ethical judgments in creativity, rather than one group, the humans, dictating ethics for the collective. So, this kind of dialogic engagement sees humans and others engaging in a process of becoming through their interaction with each other. Each is changed and emerges differently through the interaction. In fact, everything is being made through that interaction. If we therefore define creativity in this way within education, we can see that I'm arguing that children are becoming in interaction with teachers, schools, the environment, ideas, and elements such as technology. And because of this, excitingly, I think there is the potential for the whole educational system to be changed through those children from the inside out through these embodied material dialogues. So I'm therefore arguing that post-humanizing creativity provides us with a greater chance of creatively living with the changes and challenges of technology, relationships, and sustainability. This is because it fully acknowledges the environment, technology, and other living beings as players in the creation of these challenges, and in turn sees them as active parts of the solutions to the problem, rather than something to be done to by humans. Post-humanizing creativity therefore gives us a toolkit to respond wisely together to the wicked anthropocentric problems that we are all now facing. Since 2018, I've been really fortunate to have these ideas picked up by colleagues and funders and to put them into action in research initiatives. The first collaborative empirical article I wrote after the book chapter was with Lindsay Hetherington and other colleagues on the Creations Project working in primary and secondary EU education. Here, we were able to use post-humanizing creativity to develop teaching and learning in science and arts, or STEAM provision, as some of you may know it, across European education. We were able to forefront the importance of honouring students' flights of imagination with the other than human when exploring scientific questions, the role of real rather than hypothetical experiences for in-depth learning, the inclusion of teachers' and students' life experiences and curiosities, and the acknowledgement of the role of emotions, feeling, touch, and expression, questioning what it means to experience knowledge in and during creation with other than humans, rather than being told it. I was also very lucky to work on post-humanizing creativity with Katie Natanel and Heather Wren within higher education, within this project and article called Letting the Ghosts In. Here we were working to counter the neoliberalisation of UK higher education, to push back against speed and competition by focusing on embodiment, affect, ethicality, social justice and political transformation. Anybody who knows Katie Nathaniel's teaching knows that it is already potent, situated as it is within the context of gender, sexuality and violence in Palestine, Israel. Coupling her prior experience and our shared aspirations for change, we were able to move on her module teaching to emphasise the pedagogies of caring and slowing down, to take the emphasis away from the word into images, embodied and oral learning, and to take the invitation to de-centre traditional Western academic hierarchies, to acknowledge the unease and discomfort these can generate, and to work with them to develop more honest educational models in higher education. I was also invited to write about post-qualitative methodology in relation to creativity in this special issue. This allowed me the time and space for which I was very grateful to develop my understanding of the 4 methodological principles that I now work with. These are the ideas of practicing equivalence and experimentation, following Jasmine Ulmer, recasting new ways of knowing and researching, drawing on Carol Taylor, doing ethics differently through responsibility, in line with Barad, and always working very much in Anna's spirit to trouble our research thinking with curious care, following Donna Haraway. This has been particularly useful to me, given that there is not and never will be any kind of textbook for post-qualitative research. I now have a much clearer notion of how I am researching post-qualitatively, although as those working in the field will know that this is constantly shifting and developing across time. I have 3 more pieces of work currently in review, which bring the ideas into empirical research in higher education, schools-based research, and further STEAM work. But my current writing project is with keen colleagues. This is the research network that I lead at the University of Exeter. We all work around the idea of creativity and emergent education futures, with the aim of challenging the status quo in education. And despite our diversity, we are all doing work which argues for the centrality of difference and emergence, and really the necessity of researching education beyond boundaries. So through Keen, I am currently working on a book called Creative Ruptions for Emergent Educational Futures, with my co-editors Chris Turner and Heather Wren, alongside a raft of talented authors from all sorts of academic walks of life. The Creative Ruptions title, I hope, is one that Anna would have approved of. It's also the title that I have used for this lecture, as it represents the coalface, if you like, of my current thinking and collaborations in this area. The book is aiming to create meaningful and productive ruptions, disturbances or commotions in creativity and education practice and research. And it was really heartening today in the Bira Creativity SIG seminar to hear that pulling through as one of the strong calls to action, that together we now need to really try to breach and rupture the systems that we are part of. In the book, we aim to offer direct educational responses to the daunting and unpredictable challenges that we all, human and other than human, now face. We offer insights into how ethical, careful educational futures might responsively emerge through the generative potential of creativity and its associated ruptions. The book will provide transdisciplinary examples of alternative educational futures for debate and provocation. Creativity and educational futures are understood from post-human, decolonial, new materialist and feminist perspectives. These are connected but different ways of conceptualizing and actualizing change in education to go beyond dominant Western approaches. Whilst the ideas draw inspiration from Anna's work, our thinking has now developed beyond those humanist socio-constructivist roots into new approaches, drawing on powerful paradigmatic shifts that have happened since Anna left us. And we hope and think this is what Anna would have wanted to see. The book covers educational settings from HE to community education in varied disciplines and transdisciplinary settings with a wide range of ages. What all chapters have in common is that they offer emergent alternatives to traditional linear logic-based verbally centric, clearly Western educational models. The book has 3 thematic sections. In the first, creating spaces for ruptions, the chapters all consider how new ways of theorizing can create spaces for ruptions and change across education. This includes foci on such diverse ideas as embodiment, bewilderment, and liminal spatiality. The chapters in section 2, dialoguing, enter into more detailed dialogue between humans and other than humans. Here, chapters draw out the importance of environmental empathy, place-based learning through kinship, ethical and careful approaches to music making, which honour agency, and the political tensions of developing HE within challenging global environments. The final section, Resistings, offers chapters which actively resist existing structures, thinkings, and practices by challenging the status quo through combined theory-practice examples. This includes consideration of the African concept of utu to explore the aesthetics of life in music. It also includes decolonial practices of reflexivity for emancipation, and care as a radical act of resistance in higher education, alongside the role of embodied ecological practices taught outside as a form of social justice and determination. The final chapter accumulates together all of the different ruptions from across the book. It sees power for change in creativity that works from the bottom up. It offers hope that there are new and different alternatives for our educational futures that are not reliant on dominantly Western rational thought systems. And it aims to emphasise that the power for change is in all of our hands, and that this can accumulate together to make a real difference in education. The book will be published open access in 2024. Please look out for it next year. We're looking forward to spreading our thinking and debating with you. And most importantly, we're looking forward to making change happen with our readers. In the summer of 2014, I had my very last work meeting with Anna in the hospice. It was genuinely the hardest work meeting I have ever had to attend. She said to me, "Don't be afraid to be the person standing to the side, saying something different. I am really proud to be working with my colleagues and saying something different in this new book. But increasingly, I don't want us to be saying this from the side. I want the alternatives in this book to become accessible to all kinds of people and to contribute to changing how we do education." Anna and I talked about the fact that sometimes we have to speak from the side, and sometimes we get the opportunity for our work to be centralised. Working with my book co-authors, from PhD students to practitioners to professors, With the support of, I hope, a changing political wind. I fully intend to give it our best shot to centralise these ideas and for them to create more appropriate educational futures. In the spirit of how Anna encouraged us all to work, I really hope to engage with as many of you as possible as we move these ideas forward together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kerry. Just wanted to say that was really inspiring, and the visuals to go with it were making me think too. So thank you very much for that. We have a little time for questions and issues that people would like to table. There's lots buzzing in my head. I've got about 5 pages of notes here, but there we are. I'll have to go back over that. Do colleagues have anything they would like to ask or comment on in relation to Kerry's Anna Craft Memorial Lecture? You did well to hold it together when you have to make connections to friends and that last friend and that last connection. Anybody in the room want to make a comment or ask a question? There are plenty of colleagues I know. Pam, I think it looks like she's about to, but perhaps not. Go for it if you do.
I can see Dan had a hand up.
Oh, good. Excellent.
And Naomi.
I can't. Naomi, can we invite you first and then we'll move on to others? I couldn't see everybody.
Hi, I'm Anna's sister, and I just wanted to say very briefly that I wanted to thank for pulling Anna through, as she would have said, for pulling Anna through into the meeting. So thank you very much. It was very moving and very interesting, and I can picture those conversations in Harpenden over the table, and yeah, really inspiring. I work in medicine, and my daughter, who's also on the line, is a theatre director, and I can see lots of parallels in the work that you're doing. So thank you very much. It's very interesting.
Thanks, Naomi. It's really amazing to have a lot of the family members here that kind of recognise as well. So thank you for coming, and great as well that it can have resonance in different fields as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wanting to make a contribution? Pam, I think you're about to.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Thank you. As you can see, I have Anna's photo here, which is always on my desk, and she's always present in our thinking. And thank you for reminding us of the many through lines that continue like leitmotifs throughout our thinking, with Anna present every day. My question to you really is around how might post-humanizing creativity apply to the fostering of children's possibility thinking, knowing that Anna wrote so much, we did so much work together on the progression of possibility thinking, how it looks across Key Stage 1, 2, and into secondary school. What might post-humanizing creativities contribute to the fostering of children's possibility thinking in 2023 and beyond for future making education?
I think that question, Pam, really nicely picks up on some of the debates we were having in the seminar earlier, as Dan Harris, who's also with us still here, commented on. I think Anna was talking, I forget which publication, but talking about the notion of why sustainable creativities and really kind of pulling those to the fore. And I think there are a lot of, not surprisingly, a lot of the seeds of what I'm talking about in that early work that we all did with Anna, particularly around possibility thinking and the point of asking what if about the world. One of the conversations I was having recently, and I think is such a strong part of Anna's work, comes from her early years perspective on the world. And I think there is so much that we can learn from even pre-verbal children about their embodied engagement and the way that they just engage with the world in a way that we almost can't remember. And I think listening to them from what you might call their post-human perspective, they're not quite in that kind of verbalizing place, and we do them an injustice a lot, I think. And I know Anna was very keen to put their perspective forward in the world, but that idea that comes through in post-humanism, that we need to move beyond the word, we need to move beyond having the humans as the central premise and really allowing children sometimes to show us. Joanna Hayes talks about children being already able, and we kind of often discredit them for that. And I think really making sure that we see their perspective and allow them to lead the way, as sort of decentering adults as much as decentering humans, I think is a very strong strand of how that post-human work can go forward and engage both with the environment and some of the technologies that we're now dealing with, I think.
Thank you, Kerry. It's a good reminder, isn't it, of the young's multiple layers of capacity and communicative capacity, and it's not words yet, but they're still communicating and we're still understanding. Dan Harris, over to you for a question, please.
Yes, thanks. Kerry, I just want to thank you for the talk. It was very moving and just really inspiring in the way that you were able to combine your personal reflections on Anna and her mentorship and friendship with these, really generative theoretical ideas. And I never met Anna, but I was very inspired by her immediately in my PhD studies as soon as I picked up her work, and I started corresponding with her. And when I got my first funding in 2014, asked her if I could come and visit her and learn from her and debate about some of these ideas that you've mentioned today. And she was so generous and kind. I mean, she didn't know me, but she just said, oh, that would be great. I just have to go to the hospital for a bit, but maybe after that, it would be great, and then heard that she had passed and was so shocked and bereft at not being able to meet her, but also just her generosity of, sort of downplaying her situation, to keep encouraging me as a scholar. I guess my question is around the post-human. I've been similarly inspired by watching your work evolve around the post-human. And I'm wondering if you think it provides a kind of, it sounds like your new book sort of goes into this territory, but I'm wondering if you think it provides a kind of opening into some transdisciplinary or cross-curricular in school contexts approach to integrating creativity with, environmental education, for example, which is doing such innovative kind of work, both in research and in schools these days.
Yeah, I think thanks, Dan. I think the transdisciplinary approach, and for those that don't work in the area, I would define that as a way of putting education together that puts the issue, the problem that we're dealing with at the centre, and the disciplines are coming together to try to respond to that problem. And absolutely, I think the notion that the post-human allows us, it opens the door, as you're kind of saying, into that transdisciplinary pedagogy. And we mustn't forget, if we go back to the 60s and 70s in the UK, that notion of what we would have called cross-curricular education at that time, these ideas have kind of ebbed and flowed across the ages. I know Maurice, Anna's dad, was very much a sort of working presence in the field when some of these ideas were coming through, and he's probably nodding and saying, yes, we've seen some of this before, yes. And now it's trying to take the best of the current understanding, and these are the sorts of conversations I have in my head with Anna, and saying, right, we've had this before, how can we take this next wave of interest, this next wave of differently, sort of a different way of seeing this, and really try to kind of capitalize on what the post-human brings. And I think because we sadly have both the AI issues and the climate crisis issues in front of us, we have to respond to those. We have to stop with this industrialized Victorian model of education. Again, in the SIG seminar, you put forward the call to arms. We just need to redo curricula. Imagine if we redid curricula in a transdisciplinary way that put these problems at the heart of education. How much more quickly would young people leading the way really be able to respond to the problems that we're all facing? And I think, transdisciplinarity and the post-human turn, if they can sort of symbiotically catalyze us, they could really propel us into some sort of great new territory in education. I really do.
Thank you, Kerry. I can see another hand up. I think it's Simon and Ella. So please, over to you.
Hey, Ella.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for such engaging lecture, but also and like really heartfelt offering. I was really inspired by your capacity to bring your personal memories of Anna, who was my mum, together with such like meaningful thoughts about what work she was doing in the past, but also how you've taken that on today. And I was really excited to see ideas that I explored at university, from which I only graduated 2 years ago, being part of like what you're working on now and how that intersects with mum. And I always wish that I could talk to her about ideas, but this is a really nice opportunity for that. And I have a question, which is in response to what you, I think, were indicating in the middle of what you said about posthumanism, allowing learners to be an embodied presence that initiates dialogic like happenings and learnings without them necessarily even being aware of it, or that's how I heard that idea. And I'm curious to know how it might be useful for learners who are older and potentially quite cerebrally molded into an unhelpful way of learning, or like a more rigid way of learning, to like be made aware of how their embodied presence is also in the room, and whether that's part of the thinking.
Absolutely part of the thinking. I should start by saying, Ella, your mum would be super proud of that question. As a starter, you've hit the nail on the head, so to speak. And I think that realization that for many of us, that embodied presence, it's something we are all living and engaged in every day, and yet we can forget about it. And I think one of my chapter in the book is about embodiment, and it's about how we can work with touch and time, even in the smallest instances. So, for example, something I do with a lecture theatre of 80 students is to get them to work in an embodied way, to stand up out of their seats, to touch palms, to touch the wall, to touch the space, to find ways to find that connection. And they're horrified when we start doing that work, I'm really honest. And yet they walk out of that lecture theatre hopefully having had a very different experience, and just that remembering that we've all got this in us. And one of the things that I ask in the chapter in the book is just to say, what is your embodied thing? What do you remember? It might be riding a horse, it might be playing football, it might be anything on that list that you can tap back into and say, what can I bring of that into my pedagogy, into my engagement with learners? If you're a learner, how can you bring that into the classroom? And to tap back into, as you say, a kind of almost unconscious awareness that we all have this in us, and we can all use it as part of making the changes we want to see happen, is really important, I think.
That's really great to hear, really useful things to know.
Thanks
you.
Thank you, Ella. Anybody else got a question? I can't see any more hands up at the minute.
I'm not sure how to get my hand up correctly, but if I can just say that my name's David Abrahamson, and my mother and Alma's mother were sisters, and I'm getting on a bit, so I've made a total hash of joining, but I only just got in time for the discussion now, but even listening to the discussion is interesting for me, because I'm a retired psychiatrist, and I think some of the ideas which I've picked up in the discussion relate to concerns to do with psychiatric patients who have what are termed delusional ideas, because in exploring them, And the term rupture is used in psychotherapy as well. They give information about human beings, not about what's sometimes called artificial intelligence. It's information about human beings and the workings of the brain. As I didn't hear it all, I may have got it wrong, but I'd like to just make that point, as it seems to me that it's giving us information about the human mind and the way it works and the very subtle ways in which things can be distorted, which is another great value to the work which Anna did.
Thank you, David. I would absolutely agree with that. And I think there's some really interesting work coming through in mental health practice currently. One of the authors in our book, Ursula Crickmay, who is with us today, has looked at how we can understand early onset dementia from a post-human perspective, and really pushing back against that idea of these sorts of conditions as deficit. And it goes back to that idea that I was talking about, that I think posthumanism not only helps us to decenter the humans per se, but it can also help us to decenter the sort of notion of the normative, of the dominantly central view of what it is to be a normal human being. And actually, by opening up the space to understand perspectives from dementia, from psychiatric patients, from young children, all of those different marginalized perspectives can really be looked at to offer different insight and different ways of being and knowing in the world. So I think you're picking up on a very kind of strong point that was sort of, as she called it, a through line in Anna's work. But I think it's a strong sort of thrust of the post-human, that it helps us to really spotlight beyond a Western normal headset, and particularly include things as well like Indigenous ways of knowing, which we've, again, in the Western academia, have forgotten that kind of connection, and making sure we honour that knowledge rather than kind of trying to own it and colonise it again, really bring that Indigenous view through in its own right, and allow space for that. And I'm aware that in saying that, I am using the word allow, because there is a Western academia that has to find ways to ally with Indigenous peoples and to bring their work through. Because if we leave it to happen of its own accord, I fear it won't happen because of the structures of Western academia and that Western dominant rational mindset. So there are many challenges around that, I think, but stuff that increasingly people are aware of and looking to turn on their head, I think. So thanks. I think it's a really pertinent point.
Thank you.
Wendy's got a question. Wendy, please do a voice.
Yeah, hi. Not really a question, just say thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Alma, inviting me to this very moving and inspiring annual event. I really loved the slide you had with the two sparklers there, one igniting the other. I mean, that's a wonderful idea. Wonderful. That was Anna, right? Inspiring others to continue the work. I have one anecdote, not really an anecdote. Back in 2000, I was doing my master's thesis in Israel, but through the University of London Institute of Education. And when I was in England, because we had to come to England for a few weeks in the summer, which was fun, I interviewed Anna to give me some insight into the British education system. And I'll always remember that. It wasn't, we weren't talking about creativity, all these sort of things, but they were always there in the background. I was a teacher for many, many, many years, teaching English as a foreign language in Israel. I am Anna's first cousin. Alma and Morris are my aunt and uncle, very dearly cherished relatives. And it was just great to be able to connect with everybody here. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Wendy.
you, Wendy. That's really good to hear. I think we don't have any other questions now. Kerry, is there anything you wanted to finish by saying? I've got a couple of final comments, but I'll leave the space to you in case you wanted to summarize something or say, repeat yourself in some way.
No, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. It's been a real honour for me to be able to mark my friendship and professional relationship with Anna through this lecture, and I'm just very grateful for the opportunity. Thank you.
I just want to say, as another friend, that I know she would be not only proud of her daughter's questions, but proud of your presentation too, and the way that you have taken this space on. So as she used to say, let's go for a big glass of wine. BGOW is what you're allowed now, which is the common piece. Might I invite colleagues who are here to either take their mics off just to give Kerry a proper human round of applause, an embodied round of applause rather than simply a silent one. And lots of people saying thank you very much and fantastic talk in the chat line. You've created all sorts of options for us to now go and discuss with other people. And we look forward to the book coming out so that that kind of conversation can be pushed further on and take more consequence as we go forward as educators. And we look forward also, I hope, to a series of seminars or some other kind of opportunities in which those opportunities will be made available. It just leaves me to thank BERA for hosting us for this and to make it clear to everybody that the recording will be available both online at the University of Exeter and online at the Open University, the universities that Anna worked in when she passed. So thank you, Kerry, again. Have a good evening, everybody.